Okay, good morning. Now that we have a very clean table and some water on the table, we're going to begin. This session is being recorded, so if I'm not very clear, if I missed out on details, especially those of you who are listening and accessing the online session, although we wish you were here, but if I did miss out on things and you need more clarification, my email's on the last slide, and you can always email me and ask questions, but certainly if you're here, I welcome questions and clarification. So in the short 25 minutes that we have, what I'm hoping to do is to provide you with an overview about how I used technology in my teaching. I must say that I'm not an expert in technology use, but I did try. So I'm going to share with you today, how I integrated technology in my writing class. My name is Esther Boucher-Yip, and I'm from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has many universities, and WPI being one of them, and WPI offers education in science and technology. And increasingly, we have students from all over the world, from China, from Vietnam, most of the Southeast Asian countries, and from South America. So in my classes, we have many international students with a wide variety of English language skills. So that brings me to my next slide. So what I want to do is to explain to you a little bit about how I went about redesigning a course, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of the course, how I designed it, developed it, and more importantly, the outcomes and implications for teachers like you and I. A little bit about WPI. It's a very intensive course where learners come and they have a 7-week term. Unlike most traditional universities in the United States, where 14, 15, 16 weeks is the traditional course length, at WPI it's just 7 weeks. So students come with the expectations of intensive learning. So in keeping with the university's emphasis on intensive learning experiences and the application of knowledge, I found myself needing to redesign and rethink how I used my course materials in teaching writing to meet my students' needs and also for my own survival in that 7-week term. How many of you are familiar with a course management system like Blackboard or Canvas? Oh, wonderful. Okay. Okay. So I decided to go with Blackboard because Blackboard is increasingly popular in many universities in the United States, as is Canvas. But many students have access to Blackboard at WPI, and they have no excuse not to access materials posted by professors on Blackboard. So the model that I wanted to adopt and to adapt was the blended learning environment. So students were able to access materials on their own and to go and discover many of the materials on their own. So that was the intention and the purpose for redesigning this course. Basically, what I wanted to do in that 7 weeks in my writing class was to teach students in class and to continue teaching and continue that learning experience in an online space. So, the learning does not end once they leave the classroom. They need to continue to go and access the course site and to continue working on course materials and exercises and review materials online. So in thinking about how would blended learning work for me and my teaching style and my comfort level, I had to rethink which components in my course that could comfortably and sensibly be posted online. So as teachers of writing, we all know that grammar takes a lot of class time to teach. So I figured that I would take grammar teaching and grammar topics out of the classroom and teach that online. But at the same time, I wanted students to be autonomous and independent in accessing this information and doing their learning on their own. So that was the biggest challenge for me, deciding on which components of the writing class that would be posted online and provide students with that learning space. But fortunately for me, most of my students are comfortable with online learning. They come to WPI with a lot of experience with Facebook, Twitter, and all of the other social networking sites. So WPI offers students sites to all their courses. So it depends on the professors how much of Blackboard they want to use in their courses. So once again, we have many resources on campus, especially experts with technology background to help me to think about how to redesign the course and how a blended model would work in a writing course like mine. Okay, so if you look at this slide, these are just snapshots of screenshots of the course that I had set up. So I decided that I wanted to create an English grammar lab on my own. Certainly there are many publishers that offers sites that's linked from their textbook to their site, but I decided that in a 7-week course, there was only so much we could do in one course. So I wanted to have control and to be able to customize what my students are learning and to scaffold their learning online and in the classroom and in an online environment. So I decided to just label that English Grammar Lab. So my students are very familiar with what labs do. So that would be an opportunity for them to just click on that and decide what they wanted to explore and to work on. So with that in mind, I started thinking about how can I make the course materials attractive to students. Grammar, as you all know, many students dread learning grammar because it's not just learning how language works, but putting that in context of a writing assignment or in writing skills. So with that in mind, and you get to see how clear and distinctive the link is, students were expected to access the English Grammar Lab. So for those of you who are familiar with a course management system or a learning management system like this, there are many tools and many cool features that you can use. So what I decided was to think about how I could use some of the many tools that allows for a multimedia materials to be uploaded and inserted, embedded into the course site. So on the left, it allows you to upload audio, images, videos, even web links. So with the help of my colleagues at the Academic Technology Center, we decided to try and populate the course shell as best as we can with multimedia materials. So on the right, I created folders. I told students these were the folders that you can access at any time. And it's clearly labeled, so students have no excuse where to find the materials. They come up with very creative excuses all the time. So no excuses because it's all there. So these are some of the materials that I use. Certainly publishers do sell them. These are commercial and free resources. So if you explore a little bit more and if you're keen on creating course materials on your own, don't do that from scratch. It takes a lot of time and effort. There are other resources out there that's compatible to Blackboard, and you can easily use them and customize what you want to use in your Blackboard site. However, you want to remember there are copyright issues. So if the publishers allow you to link them to your course sites, then certainly go ahead and do that. But you want to consult maybe the librarians at your university or contact the publishers for copyright issues and permission to use that on your course links. But if you look at this little picture here, these are from YouTube. So it's easy and it's very effective to just upload a few YouTube video links that addresses certain grammar topics. So the next slide I'm going to show you, there's very specific grammar topics that I wanted students to focus on. So it's curated, it's selected by me, and I made sure that students were able to follow. It's not too fast-paced, it's not too slow, and it is exactly what I wanted them to learn in each grammar topics. Grammar Girl, it's in the CD-ROM form. It allows students to listen. So it's a podcast, and it's commercially available. So this is an example, a screenshot of what students would see when they click onto a video link. So I wanted to it to be as creative and as attractive as possible. So students may choose to watch a video clip on a grammar item as opposed to a boring, static PowerPoint lecture. They could watch this. So students were able to not just listen, but also understand how grammar works in context. So that gave them, some examples of working on certain grammar items. So this is Unit 26, non-action verbs, and I had a video link from YouTube on article usage. So again, audio is embedded also. This is a link from the web. And on the left, again, I'm selecting very specific grammar topics. I was able to pull out files from the podcast and embed that into the course site. Okay, so it took me a while to set up all of the grammar materials, and I wanted students to be able to access them quickly, easily when term began. So on the first day of class, I had students write something based on a writing prompt. So they had to write like a 2-3 page essay, and I graded and returned them. And I told students these were the 8 grammar items I wanted them to focus on. These were the frequently errors that students would make in their writing. And because there is a wide and a very diverse proficiency skills and levels in my class, it was very difficult for me to address every single error and grammar topic in a classroom situation. So these were the 8 that students really had to learn and master. And again, my aim was to help students become independent learners. So I told them these were the 8 grammar topics that they needed to access on their own, learn on their own, and it's all available on Blackboard. So they were very clear with this. This is the expectations that they needed to pay attention to. Also, on the first week of class, in fact, I had students going to Blackboard just to make sure they're familiar with the environment, they're familiar with the tools and how to access the information. Students had to take a diagnostic exercise. This is not something that I created on my own, although I wish I did. It's taken from the test bank. So if you use one of the textbooks from the publishers, you have access to test banks, and I was able to select which topics, which level that I wanted to test my students. So students took the diagnostic exercise, so the diagnostic information was helpful for me and also for the students. So students know on the first day of class where they need to focus on, where are their weaknesses, and what grammar areas they need to work on. But I didn't tell them on the last day of class they needed to take the same quiz. So they didn't realize that they were going to take the same quiz. So after taking the first day diagnostic, they're very aware, how low or how high and how much work they need to put into that class. So the pre-test gave me an idea of how weak or how well my students would need to work on in their course. And at the end, it gave me an idea of how much improvement they have showed, and what else I needed to work on in teaching this class again. So this is a very helpful part of the class activity. So this is just a screenshot to show you that you can continue to modify and work and adapt some of the test banks that are given to you commercially and for free if you find any of them. You can go in and add some feedback. So I didn't have any feedback for students during the diagnostic stage, but in the exercises and in the review exercises and quizzes that I had where students were able to access on their own, they were constantly given feedback. And I've set it up so that they understand what went wrong, what's the correct answer, and how to go about working on the next exercise. So Blackboard allows the instructor or the administrator to change the information. Yeah? And I discovered that later on, but at the pilot stage, students were just given a score. That wasn't helpful at all. So I decided to provide more feedback so that their learning experience makes a bit more sense, and they're able to apply that in their own writing. Okay, so it's not surprising that many students at the end of the course liked and enjoyed that component of the class. Many of them said they enjoyed how easy it was to access the material. They were able to do it in bed, in their room, when they were just walking around. That's what they told me. So, so the flexibility, the pacing was much appreciated. So I kept that component. I decided that students should be able to access review exercises, quizzes on their own whenever they want. I learned a lot about English and vocabulary. So apart from just the 8 modules on grammar items, I also had links to other resources. So what I discovered was, a comment like that showed me that students not just access those modules, they also, while they are there, clicked onto other links that help them with more language learning. So that's helpful. I reviewed many times and my writing improved. So upon reflection, students realized they were able to transfer what they learned online to their writing. So this was not surprising to me. But what was surprising to me, because we had a 7-week term, students were expected to work for about 15 hours on each course. So my course meets twice in a week for 2 hours in each class meeting. So I had to ensure that students worked for 11 hours outside of the classroom. So when I first set up the online component and when I had a Blackboard ready for my course, I thought that 11 hours was quite appropriate. But when students reported at the end of the class how much work they had put in for the online component, I was very surprised. Most students reported a very minimum of 10 hours. So that's not going to work for my administrators. They expect me to increase the course load and the learning outside of the classroom. So what I decided was to ask students, to have students tell me how did they record and what happened, how did they learn online. Oops, so let me go back. Many students reported in their self-reflection interviews with me, in informal feedback, that while they are online, they are also doing other things online. So they're multitasking. So they are not really fully aware that they're really working and they're learning grammar components, completing quizzes, doing online stuff for me while they are online. So that was a big surprise to me. So being digital natives, that our students would be very comfortable in that environment, but they're doing other things at the same time. So to really make sure that students are focused on my grammar components and learning what I expected them to learn, the next time that I taught the class, I had students record and log when they access the material, what did they learn, what did they do. So that gives me a sense of how much time they had spent. So the perception with these numbers is that I'm not really learning much. I'm not really doing any work when I'm online. So that's not a good thing. So I wanted students to be more aware that online learning can take place and it should be transferred. What they learn from their online components should be transferred and applied in their writing skills. So the advantage of using technology in a course like mine is that I'm able to track students' learning. So if you're familiar with Blackboard or Canvas, you're able to, take a look at who is doing what when. So I'm able to track individual students' learning. So if they're underperforming, they're not doing the quiz as well as I think they should be, I would have conferences with them. So that's a nice and very helpful feature in that I'm able to see who is performing well and what is going on in their writing and why are they not accessing the material at the time that I wanted them to access the grammar topics. So underperforming students were given more attention. I was able to identify students who needed more help. Yeah? And that is clearly shown in their writing skills. So that helped me to intervene early on in the term rather than later on. Corrective feedback became less direct. I think as teachers, we are correcting papers all the time. So one aspect of, marking or grading worksheets is taken away. Students are able to take the quizzes. It's self-correcting. It's automatically corrected, and students get a score. Students like that, and I also like that. So it became less direct. But once again, this is a writing course. So students should be able to show me an improved writing assignments. And my job is to make sure that there are less grammar errors at the sentence level. The online component also supports classroom work. So eventually I realized that high achieving students would access the material by midterm. And it's not helping them transfer what they learn online to in-class learning experiences. And the underperforming students were just taking the quizzes and doing the review exercises right at the end. So when I am able to go in and monitor what's going on and looking at the scores, I was able to provide them with activities that supported their learning at the same time. Okay, challenges. Using technology in teaching is very satisfying, but it's also time-consuming. It took a lot of time to set up this course and the online component. It took me, all of the summer to set up the 8 modules, to populate it, think about the grammar exercises, the quizzes, and how much feedback I wanted students to be able to access on their own. Assessment was also another big challenge for me. Students were taking the quizzes and they were scoring very high because they were able to take many times. I allowed students to retake the quiz and improve their scores. So students, being good students, tend to retake the quizzes. So I was getting a false sense of how they were performing in those 4 grammar components. So what I did was to provide students with low stakes quizzes. So it's just a small component. So if they got 100 for all 8 quizzes, that's fine. It's only 10% of the entire writing grade that you would get. There are, of course, limitations in the tools. Every course Blackboard offers has a limitation of how much space you can use. So as much as I like to just embed it with videos and podcasts, there's a limitation. So I needed to just select very carefully what was only pertinent and important in that course situation or in that learning experience. Okay. So I've taught the course 3 times already and used the same components 3 times already. So I'm able to offer you some tips. Start with the learning goals. As much as you want to pack in a lot of technology in your class, you need to be very selective in what you want to achieve. So the course goals needs to be very clear to you and to your students. Why are they using technology or why they needed to access information online? So that needs to be in line with the overall course goals. The workload is something that you want to think about. You could overshoot. So at one time I had too much work online and students were not happy that we did the writing in class and everything else is done online. So they were not very happy with that. And I was not happy with that too because I had to teach in class and run over to my computer and continue teaching online to monitor, to track their learning and stuff like that. So you need to have a good sense of balance, how much work you want students to do in class and out of class. You provide opportunities. Have students come to your office, talk to you about how they use technology in the classroom and on their own, because that is an important component. If students don't have the opportunity to provide you with feedback, sometimes, as teachers, we don't realize what works and what does not work. Make connections. I found that, to have students make sense of the grammar components, I have to connect with in-class activities to what's going to happen online. So there needs to be that scaffolding that happens in class and online, and that students need to see the connection and the relevance of how these grammar components is going to affect their writing. So that's an important part. And communicate expectations. So the expectations that I have of my students in this class is that they complete the online materials and exercises quizzes in a timely manner. So, I don't want students to complete all of the 10 grammar components by week 2 because it doesn't make sense. Or wait to the last minute and complete all of the quizzes online just before we end the term. Although there are still students who do that, but I had to be very clear in what I expected them to do online. Again, I'm not an expert in technology use. I tried, but I had a lot of help from my colleagues from the ATC. So I'd be happy to answer any questions and to hear your thoughts and your experiences with Blackboard. Certainly, it's a tool. It's not an assessment tool. It does support learning. And if you have any questions, please contact me, or if we have a chance to talk about this, I'll be happy to have a discussion with you. Thank you.